Hello, adventurers. Okay, let's talk about counting arrows. It's actually a bigger issue than this, but it's a good place to start. There are various kinds of adventure gamers, mostly D&D players, but other games as well, where kind of a tipping point, kind of a do you come down as a I like Crocs or I don't like Crocs kind of person is, do you count your ammunition? Do you keep track of how many arrows you have? By extension, do you keep track of how much water, how much food you have? It goes farther than that too. Um, I've seen several times in the past week the word verisimilitude uh, put forth by gamers and designers that I greatly respect. Many of them old school gamers. Not that that's a bad thing; it's a very good thing. But as kind of a battle cry kind of a word. Um, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about how all I can really say is how I feel about it. So I am of the camp that I want you to keep track of things that will have weight in the adventure that lies ahead. I'm putting that in a very weighted way because it implies, if not says outright, that sometimes, if not most of the time, arrows, iron rations, water rations won't matter. And I think that's true. But that's kind of based on where I come from as a game designer and a game master, and to an extent as a player, mostly as a storyteller, as a game master. Um, I take my cues from fiction, both in novels like Lord of the Rings and movies. And a big, very strong influence on me is cinematic. So that's going to be the rules of storytelling on screen. Less so on TV, but more and more we see uh, TV shows being shot and structured cinematically, if that makes sense. So then the rules end up being very similar. Um, so taking a half step back here, I think what the people who say verisimilitude mean often is they're talking about realism. I have said in print that I think the pursuit of realism is a fool's game, a fool's errand. And I don't really mean it that way because I mean it as the term, not like if you do it, you're a fool. Of course not. Let me preface all of this as I do most of the things I talk about. There is no one true faith, one true path, one true way in gaming. There should not be. So if your joy, if your experience of the thing you want involves hardcore, I remember, I think it was the old version of Chivalry and Sorcery that tracked wear on your weapons and armor and things and your equipment. So you could have things like your boots wore out. Not for me, but I can see from a certain point of view for a certain kind of gamer, it's heaven. It's what you're looking for. So no judgment here. All I'm talking about is how I feel, my point of view on it, and maybe that can give you a handle on where you want to put your approach to these things. Um, so in a game like, and we're going to use D&D as the default here, because obviously there are a lot of genres and subgenres, but we're mostly talking about heroic fantasy. So like not high magic, but like kind of medium magic, not low magic either. I think D&D is medium magic. People eventually can teleport and stuff. They can raise the dead, but it's not high magic either. Like everything isn't like Earth Dawn. Everything isn't just buzzing with magical energy. In a world like that, we can talk all day about tracking arrows, tracking food, tracking water, but even in old school D&D, even in very early editions, you had create food and water. So it kind of puts the lie, and again, I'm not calling you a liar if you do this, but the phrase puts the lie to um, conservation and tracking some of that stuff it's a bit of a frustration for GMs in some sense. It's the transporter rule, right? So if you're writing for Star Trek, you have to keep track of things like, okay, whatever this plot is, we can beam people down to planets and right back out at almost a moment's notice. It was done in combat quite a few times over the years. That means the writer has to find ways to have kryptonite to weaken Superman to make certain plots work. In the same way, if you have spells that are going to give you back those arrows or give you back water or give you all those things, then the tracking is kind of it's a narrative flourish, if anything, because in a pinch you go, hail the gods, and water comes down, right? So it's really only important then when you have to have such tight management of both your resources and your spell resources that doing that is going to put you at risk. And that's really a parallel to the Star Trek transporter issue, right? Because the designer, the writer, the game master has to think about, well, if I want in your traveling the desert story for conservation of resources to be an issue, I have to either have there be no characters in your group that have those spells, or I have to somehow add to my givens for the story, or given to the or narrative reason that they don't work. Oh, it's the cursed lands. In the cursed lands, certain spells do not reach the ears of the gods, and the messengers do not. There's ways to do it, or just literally. I don't remember if Dark Sun did this, but you can say it's the given of this campaign that we don't have create food and water. I've certainly run campaigns where I don't have raised debt. The gods of death are stronger there, and they won't release you from the realm that haphazardly. And it creates a different feel. Like every time you muck about with those kind of structural, foundational things, you create a different gaming experience. An excellent example of that is Shadow Dark. Shadow Dark rolls back damn near to first edition, but informed by some of our more modern ideas. But honestly, things like torch tracking, ammo tracking, and so forth does matter more because there are less spells, there's less magic, they're more precious, and I think that's what people like about it in large form. So, where do I stand? I think realism is not a great term. It's not being used largely, using verisimilitude. And the difference is realism is trying to make something realistic, whereas verisimilitude is giving the feel or the impression of realism, which is more doable and more of a thing and can be an excellent way to play a game. I think the kind of Skyrim community has a better word for it. They use immersion. So when you play a game with me, I want to set up the world, set up this setting, set up your experience so that you and I have a shared page understanding of what your access to resources is like, so you know what to expect. You know if that shifts in some way, what that means in the story. I want you to have a good grasp on what your character's mortality is like, so that you know when you draw your blade or you whatever you go into combat, you should know what your risks are, so that the risks have weight. You want then for the battles that result, the challenges that you face to be exciting, and to do that, everybody has to be on the same page. And where I share blood with the verisimilitude people is immersion is very important to me as well. I mean, it's a cousin to what you're talking about, but I think we both want the feeling. Let's say this. I really think it's important that players make I statements. Okay? And again, no one true faith, you do you. If your players are more comfortable or really dig speaking of the characters like you're in Clash of the Titans and saying, and then Barathor steps forward, like, do that. That's fine. I think it limits immersion and hampers it. So I encourage my players to say, I step forward, I draw my sword. Um, some players get anxious because they are not voice actors. They're not, and obviously you don't have to be, for God's sake. Um, but there's an expectation set by certain media, like it's a two-edged sword, right? It's opened our player base tremendously, but some people feel that they need to be able to do voices or whatever. You don't. You absolutely don't. However, saying I puts you then take the form of that character and you step onto the field. And I want that for you. I want you to be immersed enough to be excited when the fight is happening and elated with your victories. So I think the people that speak of verisimilitude are of common cause with me and people like me, and that's what we want, right? We want an engaging and exciting game. There's another word, engaging. Um, Rather than talking verisimilitude, I often use the term plausibility. So to set something up where you're on the same page, um, I think the as long as we all understand what the world is like and how it works, um, we're good, right? And for people to invest and make decisions based on this information and the ongoing story and the narrative, they need to buy in, which requires plausibility. It has to be realistic enough for them to go, okay, if it's completely cuckoo bananas, the more cuckoo bananas it is, the harder it is to feel like it's a plausible universe and to become immersed and to buy into it. Sometimes the little things like the counting your arrow, the counting your ammo, and the keeping track of your stuff helps, and I see that. Um, a joke I often make, which isn't very funny, but that doesn't mean I don't make it, is I can't imagine Aragorn counting his arrows. Um, Literally in the game that I most recently designed, Nuked, there was an early version where you counted ammo because it's a post-apocalyptic game, and obviously, the bullet farm, there's ammo's a thing. But in play, it was accounting. It was not fun. It was a pain in the ass. So, in service of the plausibility, the story, the immersion, all of that, the decision was made that only on certain things like a botch or a narrative turn would ammo ever be a thing, right? So if you make a particularly bad roll, I could say, oh shit, you ran out of ammo for your SMG, or you pop in another clip and you find out that that load had dud ammo. It had gone bad. So click, 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 right? It gives you the same that I think looking at your sheet and going 0 rounds gives you, but without having to do the accounting. But that's because my goal is um, I'd like it to be kind of as cinematic as possible. I'd like you to walk into a fun genre movie. And not everybody has those same goals. Wargaming is a big place to look at that, right? You got war games that are kind of card driven and very simple and very fast playing and kind of only take the most important things. Then you have stuff like Terrible Swift Sword, which takes hours to set up and can take days to play, but it keeps track of everything, weather, supply lines, all that kind of stuff. Which, if that's where your head is at and that's what you want to experience, it's amazing. Um, Not my thing, right? I'd be more likely to do the card-based quick play thing. So in the same way, I'm only going to keep track of ammo when things happen like, say Aragorn is in Moria. Okay, normally we assume he's able to track his arrows, pull them back, do some repairs. When he sets up for the night, he's probably enough of a Fletcher to be able to just make some more. Probably occasionally you'd, again, narrative flourish. You'd give like a oh, when you're hunting, you don a bird and you pluck some feathers for making arrows later. You're gonna need fletching. Um, you give a nod to that in a way that creates immersion without record keeping. However, if they go down to Moria, in that story, they're down there a while. So in that case, I could see giving a not permanent but temporary. Okay, guys, you've entered Moria. That means no short rests. This is in D&D 5th only, really, because you can't properly rest. You can do a long rest, but it'll be dangerous because it's long. But no short rests. Also, from here on out, you do have to count your ammo, and here is how much each of you will have to start. And unless you find other stuff, the best you can do is pick up what you fired, and you're going to get half back. Okay? You could make rolls for each one, like you do make a saving throw for each arrow or something. But honestly, something quick and dirty and simple, like you get half back, um, gets the point across. It does the job of the timed torches in Shadow Dark, right? Where you can see. There's a thing in computer game design. I did some work in that industry. I worked QA lead for one of the Star Wars games, and I'm sure you've all experienced this. But if the game mechanics, no matter how cool and sophisticated they are, if the way it feeds back to you and communicates with you isn't something you understand, if the player doesn't, I kept saying this to the people in the department dealing mechanics, if the player doesn't tangibly feel it and realize it, it might as well not exist. In fact, in many cases, it's harmful for it to exist. It's just more elements you don't have to be balancing, which could detract from other elements just to give you something that only somebody analyzing numbers is going to pick up on. So, in the same way, one really nice thing about the torch timer is you're really aware of it. I know people who do things like use sand timers because it's such an obvious thing, which is great. There's a game some friends of mine developed a while back called Dread that's horror, but they use a Jenga tower, which is the most brilliant thing I ever heard. So when you do certain things, you're fighting the horrible, unspeakable darkness, you pull a thing, right? And then eventually, when it collapses, because it must, terrible things happen. But boy, that is even better than the whole torch going out timer thing, because you're looking at it and teeters and everything. Like you can see, you can taste how precarious your situation becomes, and that's chef's kiss. 100% awesome. Um, so what I want try to do is those things exist, but I call attention to them only when they are an element in the story they're playing, as opposed to it being um, what could become a distraction or a burden, if that makes sense to y'all. So, personally, I don't count ammo. Personally, I don't track food or rations. I've certainly run games where those things are real important. Um, I'm never going for verisimilitude. I'm always going for immersion. I would like you to be immersed in whatever world I'm presenting so we can adventure there together. All right. Well, nice talking to you. And I will talk to you again real soon.